Jake Morrison sat in the waiting room of the Galactic Council building, staring at the strange alien artwork on the walls. The paintings showed creatures with too many eyes and colors that hurt to look at. He rubbed his tired face and wondered why he had agreed to come here. The building was huge and made of some kind of white stone that seemed to glow from inside. Aliens of all shapes and sizes walked past him. Some had fur, others had scales, and a few looked like walking trees. Jake had seen many alien species during his 20 years in the Marines, but this place still made him feel small. A soft chime sounded, and a voice spoke from somewhere in the ceiling. "Commander Morrison, Director Carter will see you now. Please, proceed to room 47B. Jake stood up and straightened his uniform. He was a big man, over 6 feet tall, with gray hair and scars on his hands from years of outdoor work. His blue eyes were sharp and alert, always watching for danger even in safe places like this. He found room 47B and knocked on the door. A woman's voice called for him to enter. Inside, Director Helen Carter sat behind a desk made of crystal. She was in her 50s, with short brown hair and the kind of serious face that meant business. "Jake, thank you for coming," she said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. "I know you retired from active duty, but we have a situation that requires your specific skills." Jake sat down and crossed his arms. "What kind of situation?" Helen touched a button on her desk, and the air above it shimmered. A hologram appeared showing a blue-green planet with 2 small moons. "This is Zelith Prime, a colony world in the Outer Rim. 3 months ago, something terrible happened to the main Zelithian homeworld." The hologram changed to show a beautiful planet covered in silver cities and floating structures. "The Zelithians are one of the most advanced species in the galaxy. Their technology can do almost anything. Their cities run themselves, their food is created by machines, and their people live in perfect comfort." Jake nodded. He had heard of the Zelithians before. They were known for being peaceful and very smart, but also for never leaving their comfortable worlds. "The problem," Helen continued, "is that their main computer system failed. Not just failed, it was completely destroyed by some kind of virus. In one day, billions of Zelithians lost everything. No food machines, no climate control, no automated systems at all." The hologram showed chaos on the Zelithian homeworld. Tall, thin blue creatures wandered through dark cities, looking lost and afraid. "Most of them didn't make it," Helen said. Quietly, they had never learned how to do anything for themselves. They didn't know how to find food, make fire, or even find clean water. Within weeks, most of the population was gone. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. He had seen disaster zones before, but this was different. This was an entire species that had forgotten how to survive. "A small group managed to escape to their colony world, Zelith Prime," Helen went on. "About 50,000 of them. But that world doesn't have the same advanced systems as their homeworld. It's more like Earth was 1,000 years ago, lots of plants and animals, but you have to work to survive." Helen touched another button, and the hologram showed the Zelithian refugees on their new world. They sat in groups, looking thin and weak. Some were trying to eat things that were clearly not food. Others were building shelters that looked like they would fall down in the first strong wind. "They're dying, Jake," Helen said. "Not from war or disease, but because they don't know how to live without machines. They sent a message to the Galactic Council asking for help. Specifically, they asked for human help." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Why humans?" "Because we have a reputation," Helen said with a small smile. "Throughout the galaxy, humans are known for being able to survive anywhere, eat almost anything, and adapt to any situation. Other species call us crazy for living on worlds that would kill them in days." Jake had to admit that was true. Humans lived on worlds with poisonous air, crushing gravity, and deadly weather. They seemed to enjoy the challenge. "The Zelithians have heard stories about human survival skills," Helen continued. "They want someone to teach them the basics. How to find food, make fire, build shelter, purify water, all the things that human children learn by the time they're 10 years old." Helen leaned forward in her chair. Jake, you're perfect for this job. You spent 15 years training Marines in survival techniques. You've lived in deserts, jungles, frozen wastelands, and alien environments. You know how to teach people to stay alive when everything goes wrong. Jake thought about it. After retiring from the Marines, he had been working as a survival instructor at a training camp in Montana. The work was good, but sometimes boring. Teaching rich people how to start fires and find berries wasn't exactly challenging. What's the mission exactly? He asked. 6 months on Zeleth Prime, Helen said. Teach basic survival skills to the refugee population. The Galactic Council will pay you well, and you'll have full support from their medical and science teams. Jake looked at the hologram again. The Zelithians looked so helpless. In his years as a Marine, he had always felt good about helping people who couldn't help themselves. What are they like? Jake asked. The Zelithians, I mean. Peaceful, intelligent, and completely harmless, Helen said. They're about 7 feet tall, with blue skin and 4 arms. They've never had a war in their entire history. Their culture is based on cooperation and learning. They're probably the gentlest species in the galaxy. That made Jake feel better. He had dealt with hostile aliens before, and it never ended well. They're also desperate, Helen added. Their leader, Ambassador Krevash, sent a personal message saying they would do anything for human help. They know they're going to die without these skills. Jake stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see the busy streets of the Council City. Aliens from 100 different worlds went about their daily lives. Most of them had never had to worry about finding their next meal or staying warm at night. I'll need to know more about their world, Jake said. Climate, dangerous animals, what plants are safe to eat, that kind of thing, Helen smiled. I have a complete briefing package for you. Zeleth Prime is actually very similar to Earth. The gravity is a little lighter, the days are a bit longer, but the plants and animals are not too different from what you'd find in a temperate forest. Any intelligent predators? Nothing dangerous to someone with your training. The most dangerous animal is something like a bear, but smaller and not very aggressive. Jake nodded. It sounded like a straightforward job. Teach some basic skills to grateful aliens, help them get back on their feet and come home with a good paycheck. When do I leave? He asked. Tomorrow, if you accept, Helen said. The transport ship is already prepared. You can bring whatever equipment you think you'll need. Jake thought about his small apartment in Montana. He thought about the same routine every day, teaching the same lessons to people who would probably never need them. Then he looked at the hologram of the desperate Zelithians. I'll do it, he said. Helen's face lit up with relief. Thank you. Jake, you might be saving an entire species. As Jake left the council building, he had no idea how much his life was about to change. He thought he was just going to teach some aliens how to make fire and find water. He had no way of knowing that in 6 months they would be begging him to stay forever. The transport ship landed on Zeleth Prime with a soft thud that barely shook the ground. Jake Morrison grabbed his gear bag and walked down the exit ramp, breathing in the alien air for the first time. It smelled clean and fresh like a forest. After rain, the sky was a light purple color, and 2 small moons hung low on the horizon. Trees that looked almost like earth oaks covered the hills around the landing site, but their leaves were silver instead of green. Jake could hear birds singing in the distance. Though he suspected they weren't really birds, a group of Zelithians waited for him near the landing pad. Jake had seen pictures of them in his briefing materials, but seeing them in person was different. They were much taller than he expected, nearly 8 feet high, with thin bodies and long limbs. Their skin was a soft blue color that seemed to glow slightly in the alien sunlight. The most striking thing was their 4 arms. 2 arms came from their shoulders like humans, but 2 more sprouted from their sides, just below their ribs. All 4 arms moved independently, creating a strange flowing motion when they walked. One of the Zelithians stepped forward. Jake could tell this one was old because his blue skin had darker patches and his movements were slow and careful. When he spoke, his voice sounded like wind chimes. Commander Morrison, the alien said, I am Elder Council Leader Vexnara. We are grateful beyond words that you have come to help us. Jake nodded and tried not to stare at the alien's face. The Zilithians had large eyes that took up almost half their face, but no nose that he could see. Their mouth was small and seemed to smile constantly, though Jake suspected that was just how their face was shaped. Happy to help, Jake said. Where should I put my gear? Vexnara gestured with two of his arms toward a cluster of buildings in the distance. We have prepared quarters for you in our settlement. But first, perhaps you would like to see our situation. Jake followed the group of Zilithians down a dirt path toward their colony. As they walked, he started to see how bad things really were. The briefing materials hadn't prepared him for this. The buildings were made of some kind of metal that had been bent and shaped by hand. Most of them looked like they might fall over in a strong wind. Some had holes in the walls that had been covered with pieces of cloth. Others had roofs that sagged in the middle. Zilithians sat in small groups around the settlement, looking tired and weak. Many of them were very thin, and Jake could see their ribs through their skin. Children clung to their parents, making soft crying sounds. How long have you been here? Jake asked. 4 months, Vexnara replied. We arrived with emergency food. Supplies that were supposed to last 6 months, but he made a gesture with his arms that Jake didn't understand. But what? Many of our people did not know how to ration food properly. They ate too much at first, thinking more supplies would arrive soon. Others could not tell which of the local plants were safe to eat, so they avoided all plant food. Some tried to eat things that made them very sick. Jake stopped walking and looked around the settlement again. Now he could see the real problem. These people weren't just hungry, they were completely lost. They had no idea how to take care of themselves. A young Zilithian approached them, moving with quick, nervous steps. This one looked female, though Jake wasn't sure how he could tell. She spoke rapidly to Vexnara in their own language, her 4 arms waving in what looked like panic. Vexnara's large eyes grew even larger. Commander Morrison, we have an emergency. Would you come with us? They hurried to the edge of the settlement where a group of Zilithians had gathered around something on the ground. As Jake got closer, he could see it was another Zilithian, this one lying very still. His blue skin had turned a darker, unhealthy color. What happened? Jake asked. The young female Zilithian answered. I am Nathresh. This is my brother, Kolmesh. He was very hungry and found some berries growing near the stream. He ate many of them, but now he will not wake up. Jake knelt down beside the unconscious Zilithian and checked his pulse. It was weak but steady. The alien's breathing was slow and shallow. Jake had seen this before, plant poisoning. Show me these berries, he said. Nathresh led him to a bush near a small stream. The berries were bright red and looked delicious, but Jake recognized them from his briefing materials. They were similar to pokeweed berries from Earth, not deadly, but definitely not food. These berries are poison, Jake said. Not strong poison, but enough to make you very sick. Your brother will probably be okay, but he needs to drink lots of water and rest. Jake looked at the group of Zilithians who had followed them. They all stared at him with their large eyes, waiting for him to solve the problem. Has anyone else eaten these berries? He asked. Several hands went up. Jake counted 12 Zilithians who had been poisoned by the same bush. Okay, first thing we need to do is make sure everyone drinks clean water, Jake said. Lots of it. The poison needs to be washed out of your systems. He walked back to the stream and knelt down beside it. The water looked clean, but Jake had learned never to trust appearances. He pulled a small testing kit from his gear bag and checked the water quality. It was good, but it could be better. This water is safe to drink, he told the group, but we can make it safer. I'm going to show you how to purify water so you never have to worry about getting sick from it. Jake spent the next hour teaching the Zilithians how to boil water and how to build a simple filter using sand and cloth. They watched him with intense focus, their 4 arms moving as they took notes in their own language. As the sun began to set, Jake realized this was going to be much harder than he had expected. These people didn't just need to learn survival skills, they needed to learn how to think like survivors. Vexnara, Jake said, I need to ask you something important. Have your people ever had to worry about dangerous plants before? The elder Zilithian looked confused. Dangerous plants? On our homeworld, all plants were safe. Our machines made sure of that. If a plant was dangerous, the machines would remove it or change it to make it safe. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. What about dangerous animals? There were no dangerous animals on our homeworld. The machines controlled all animal behavior. If an animal became aggressive, the machines would calm it down. Sharp objects, fire, poisonous substances, all controlled by the machines, Vexnara said. Our people have never needed to worry about such things. Jake looked around the settlement again, seeing it with new eyes. These weren't just people who had forgotten survival skills, they were people who had never needed survival skills in the first place. They came from a world where danger simply didn't exist. How many of your people have been hurt since you arrived here? Jake asked. Vexnara's expression grew sad. We have lost 47 people in 4 months. Some from eating wrong plants, some from drinking bad water, some from cuts that became infected. 3 fell from trees they were trying to climb for fruit. 2 drowned in the stream because they never learned to swim. Jake did quick math in his head. 47 deaths out of 50,000 people in 4 months. That was a disaster by any measure. At this rate, half the population would be dead within 2 years. We tried to learn on our own, Nalthresh said quietly. But we make mistakes. We don't know what is dangerous and what is safe. Everything on this world can hurt us, and we don't understand why. Jake looked at the young Zilithian and saw the fear in her large eyes. These people weren't stupid, they were terrified. They had been thrown into a world full of dangers they couldn't recognize or understand. Okay, Jake said. We're going to start with the most important things first. Rule number 1, never eat anything unless you're absolutely sure it's safe. Rule number 2, always purify your water. Rule number 3, everything can be dangerous until you learn otherwise. The Zilithians around him nodded eagerly, hanging on every word. Tomorrow we start training, Jake continued. I'm going to teach you how to stay alive. But tonight I want everyone who ate those berries to drink lots of clean water and rest. And I want guards posted around all the dangerous plants in this area. As the Zilithians hurried to follow his instructions, Jake realized he wasn't just a teacher anymore. He was their lifeline to survival, and their lives depended on how well he could teach them to think like humans. Jake woke up before dawn, as he had done every day for the past 20 years. Outside his small shelter, the Zilithian settlement was quiet except for the soft sounds of alien birds and the gentle hum of wind through the silver-leafed trees. He had been on Zilith Prime for 2 weeks now, and every day brought new challenges. Yesterday he had spent 4 hours teaching a group of Zilithians that fire was hot and could burn them. The day before that, he had to explain why they shouldn't drink from puddles of standing water. Jake pulled on his boots and stepped outside. The 2 moons were still visible in the purple sky, casting strange shadows across the ground. He walked through the settlement, checking on the improvements they had made. The Zilithians were quick learners once they understood a concept, but getting them to understand was the hard part. Jake had to explain things that seemed obvious to any human child. Don't touch sharp objects with your bare hands. Don't eat mushrooms you find in the woods. Don't build your shelter in a place where water collects when it rains. As he walked, Jake saw Nalthresh sitting by the stream with a group of young Zilithians. She was showing them how to test water quality using the simple methods Jake had taught her. Her 4 arms moved gracefully as she demonstrated the process, and Jake was impressed by how well she had learned. Good morning, Commander Morrison. Nalthresh called out when she saw him. I am teaching the morning water collection group. Jake walked over to watch. Nalthresh had set up a small filtration system using sand, gravel, and cloth, just as he had shown her. But she had added something new, a second filter that used crushed charcoal from their cooking fires. Where did you learn to do that? Jake asked, pointing at the charcoal filter. I thought about what you said about removing bad things from water, Now Thresh explained. Charcoal absorbs many substances. We use it in our art on the homeworld. I wondered if it might work for water. 2. Jake tested the water that came through her filter. It was cleaner than anything his basic system could produce. That's brilliant, he said. You just improved on something it took human centuries to develop. Now Thresh's skin glowed a little brighter, which Jake had learned was how Zilithians showed happiness. The other young Zilithians around her made soft, chiming sounds that meant they were excited. This was happening more and more. Once the Zilithians grasped a basic concept, they found ways to make it better. Their forearms gave them advantages that humans didn't have, and their natural intelligence let them see solutions that Jake missed. Jake continued his morning walk and found Mixkala, an older Zilithian who had become one of his best students. She was working with a construction group, building new shelters using techniques Jake had taught them, but these weren't the simple lean-to shelters from Jake's lessons. Mixkala had designed something much more complex. The shelters had strong foundations, proper drainage, and walls that could be adjusted based on the weather. Best of all, they were built to take advantage of Zilithian anatomy. Mixkala, this is amazing work, Jake said as he examined the construction. The older Zilithian looked up from where she was weaving wall panels. Your teaching showed us the principles, Commander. But we needed homes that work for our bodies and our families. Jake watched as the construction crew worked. With 4 arms each, they could hold materials in place while tying knots and making adjustments. Work that would take a human crew hours was being finished in minutes. How many families can live in one of these? Jake asked. Each shelter can. House 8 to 10 Zilithians comfortably, Mixkala replied. We have completed 15 so far with 20 more planned. Jake did the math in his head. If they kept working at this pace, every Zilithian in the settlement would have proper housing within a month. When he had arrived, most of them were sleeping on the ground under pieces of cloth. As the morning went on, Jake made his rounds to the other training groups. The fire-making class had learned to create flames using friction, flint, and even focused sunlight. The food identification group could now recognize 30 different edible plants and knew which parts were safe to eat. The hunting and fishing group was his biggest success story. Led by a young male named Zexkalen, they had learned to make simple spears, set traps, and catch fish from the stream. Yesterday they had brought back enough food to feed 50 families, but it was the first aid group that impressed Jake the most. Zilithians had a natural gentleness that made them excellent at caring for the sick and injured. They learned to clean wounds, apply bandages, and recognize signs of infection faster than any human students Jake had ever taught. After lunch, Jake gathered all the group leaders together for their daily meeting. This had become his favorite part of each day. The Zilithians would share what they had learned, ask questions, and propose new ideas. Commander, Zexkalen said, the hunting group has found something interesting. There are large animals in the forest that might provide much food, but they are too big for our current weapons. Jake nodded. What kind of animals? They look like your earth deer, but larger. They have thick fur and are not afraid of us. But our spears are too small to hunt them safely. We could work together, Now Thresh suggested. My water group has learned to make strong ropes. The construction group knows how to build large traps. Perhaps we could combine our skills. This was exactly what Jake had hoped would happen. The Zilithians were starting to think like a community, sharing knowledge and working together to solve problems. That's a great idea, Jake said. But first, let me teach you about hunting larger animals safely. There are rules we need to follow to avoid accidents. Over the next hour, Jake explained hunting safety, animal behavior, and the importance of using the entire animal for food, clothing, and tools. The Zilithians listened carefully, asking thoughtful questions and taking detailed notes. As the meeting ended, Elder Vexnara approached Jake privately. The old Zilithian moved slowly, and Jake could see that he was troubled about something. Commander Morrison, Vexnara said, I have received a message from the Galactic Council. They are asking about your progress and when you expect to complete your mission. Jake felt a knot form in his stomach. He had been so focused on teaching that he had almost forgotten about the 6-month time limit on his contract. What did you tell them? Jake asked. I told them that you are teaching us well and that we are learning much, but they reminded me that your contract is for basic survival skills only. They expect you to return to Earth in 4 months. Jake looked around the settlement. In just 2 weeks, the Zilithians had made incredible progress, but 4 months didn't seem like nearly enough time to teach them everything they needed to know. Elder Vexnara, Jake said, your people are doing better than I ever expected, but surviving and thriving are two different things. You need more advanced skills, weather prediction, food preservation, tool making, medicine. The elder Zilithian's large eyes grew sad. We know this, Commander. But we also know that you have duties to your own people. We cannot ask you to stay longer than agreed. That evening, Jake sat alone outside his shelter, looking up at the alien stars. In the distance, he could hear the sounds of the Zilithian settlement, families talking together, children playing, adults working on projects. Even after dark, these people had become more than just students to him. He genuinely cared about what happened to them. The thought of leaving them after only 6 months made him feel sick. NL Thresh approached him, moving quietly in the way that Zilithians did when they were being respectful. Commander Morrison, she said, may I speak with you? Of course, now, Thresh. What's on your mind? She sat down beside him, folding her 4 arms in her lap. I wanted to thank you for what you have taught us. Before you came, I was afraid every day. Afraid of the water, afraid of the plants, afraid of everything on this world. Jake nodded. And now I am still afraid sometimes, but I understand why. I know which things are dangerous and which are safe. I know how to take care of myself and my family. She paused, looking up at the stars. You have given us something more valuable than food or shelter. You have given us confidence. Jake felt a warm feeling in his chest. This was why he had become a teacher in the first place, to help people discover their own strength. You don't need me anymore now, Thresh, Jake said. You and the others are becoming excellent survivors. Perhaps, she said quietly. But we still need you as our friend. As Jake looked around the thriving settlement, he realized that these aliens had given him something valuable too. They had reminded him what it felt like to make a real difference in people's lives. 3 months had passed since Jake arrived on Zelith Prime, and the settlement looked completely different. Strong shelters lined neat pathways, gardens grew in organized rows, and smoke rose from cooking fires that never went out. The Zilithians moved with purpose now, no longer the lost and frightened refugees he had first met, but Jake was worried. The weather was changing, and his briefing materials had mentioned something about Zelith Prime's harsh season. The temperature had dropped 10 degrees in the past week, and the sky stayed cloudy most days. The alien birds had stopped singing, and many of the animals had disappeared deeper into the forest. Jake found Vexnara sitting with a group of elders, studying weather patterns they had drawn on pieces of bark. The old Zilithian looked up when Jake approached. Commander Morrison, Vexnara said, we have been watching the signs you taught us. The animals are acting strangely, and the wind carries new smells. We think the difficult season is coming soon. Jake nodded grimly. How much do you know about what happens during this season? Very little, admitted another elder named Kexvala. The original colonists left records, but they had machines to protect them. The records speak of great storms, freezing temperatures, and flooding. Jake felt his stomach tighten. He had taught the Zilithians basic survival skills, but surviving a harsh winter on an alien world required advanced knowledge. They would need better shelters, more food storage, warmer clothing, and medicine for cold weather illnesses. How long does this season last? Jake asked. 4 months, Vexnara replied. It should begin within the next few weeks. Jake looked around the settlement. The Zilithians had made amazing progress, but 4 months of severe weather would test everything they had learned. He realized his original training plan wasn't enough. "We need to accelerate our lessons," Jake announced. "Everyone needs to learn advanced survival techniques immediately." Over the next 2 weeks, Jake pushed his students harder than ever before. He taught them how to preserve meat by smoking and drying. He showed them how to make warm clothing from animal fur and how to build shelters that could withstand strong winds and heavy snow. The food preservation lessons were the most important. Jake worked with Zexcalen's hunting group to catch and process as many animals as possible. The Zilithians learned to smoke fish, dry berries, and store root vegetables in underground caches. Nal Fresh proved to be a natural at food preservation. Her forearms allowed her to work on multiple preservation techniques at once, and she had a good eye for which foods would last longest. Under her guidance, the settlement began building up food supplies that could feed everyone for months. The shelter improvements were more challenging. Jake had to teach the Zilithians about insulation, wind resistance, and heat retention. Mixcala's construction crews worked day and night to upgrade every building in the settlement. "The walls need to be thicker," Jake explained as he helped install extra insulation. "Cold air will find any gap and make your homes impossible to." Heat. The Zilithians attacked the problem with their usual innovation. They discovered that certain local plants had natural insulating properties when dried and woven together. Their four-armed physiology let them create complex weaving patterns that trapped air better than anything Jake had seen. Jake also had to teach them about fire safety and heating. "Never leave a fire unattended," he warned repeatedly. "And make sure your shelter has proper ventilation, or you could suffocate from smoke." The medical training became urgent when Jake realized that Zilithians had never experienced serious cold before. He taught them to recognize signs of hypothermia, frostbite, and other cold weather injuries. The natural healers in the community learned to make medicines from local plants that could fight fever and infection. 2 days before the first major storm was expected to hit, Jake gathered the entire settlement for a final preparation meeting. Nearly 50,000 Zilithians sat in groups around the central area, their large eyes focused on him with complete attention. "Tomorrow we face our biggest test," Jake announced. "Everything you've learned over the past months will be put to the test by nature itself." He looked out at the sea of blue faces. These people trusted him completely. Their survival depended on how well he had taught them. "Remember the most important rule," Jake continued. "Stay calm and think clearly. Panic kills more people than cold or hunger ever will. Trust your training, trust each other, and you will survive." The storm hit just after midnight. Jake woke to the sound of wind howling around his shelter like a living thing. Rain pounded against the walls, and he could hear objects being blown around outside. He quickly put on his warmest clothes and stepped outside to check on the settlement. The wind nearly knocked him over, and the rain stung his face like needles. In the darkness, he could barely see the other shelters, but what he could see impressed him. Every building was still standing. Soft light glowed from the windows, showing that the heating systems were working. Nobody was running around in panic or calling for help. Jake made his way through the storm to the central meeting area, where he found Vexnara and several other leaders monitoring the situation. They had set up a command post and were receiving reports from different parts of the settlement. "Commander Morrison," Vexnara called out over the wind, "all families are accounted for and safely sheltered." No injuries reported so far. Jake felt a surge of pride. These people were handling their first major storm like experienced survivors. The storm lasted for 3 days. Jake spent most of that time moving between shelters, checking on families, and helping with minor problems. A few roofs leaked, and one shelter lost part of its wall to the wind. But overall, the settlement weathered the storm remarkably well. When the winds finally died down and the sun came out, Jake walked through the settlement to assess the damage. What he found amazed him. Not only had the Zilithians survived the storm, they had used the time productively. In Now Thresh's shelter, families had worked together to weave new clothing and repair damaged equipment. Mixcala's group had spent the storm planning improvements to their shelters based on what they had learned. The hunting groups had organized supply distribution, making sure every family had enough food and fuel to last through the next storm. The healers had checked on elderly and sick community members, providing care and medicine as needed. How did everyone do so well? Jake asked Nalthresh as they surveyed the settlement together. We remembered what you taught us about working. Together, she replied. During the storm, no one was alone. Families helped each other, and everyone shared what they had. Jake realized that the Zilithians had learned something he hadn't even tried to teach them. They had discovered that survival wasn't just about individual skills, it was about community strength. Over the following weeks, 2 more storms hit the settlement. Each time, the Zilithians handled them better than the last. They improved their emergency procedures, refined their shelter designs, and became more efficient at managing their resources. Jake found himself with less and less to do. His students had become teachers themselves, passing on knowledge and helping newer learners. The settlement was running like a well-organized human colony. It was during the 4th storm that Elder Vexnara approached Jake with an unexpected conversation. Commander Morrison, the elder said as they sat by a warm fire, the Council of Elders has been discussing your contract with the Galactic Council. Jake felt his heart sink. He had been dreading this conversation. His 6-month assignment was almost over, and he would soon have to return to Earth. We know that your time with us is nearly finished, Vexnara continued. But we have a request to make. Jake waited, not sure what to expect. We would like to offer you permanent citizenship in our community, Vexnara said quietly. Not as a teacher, but as one of us. You have become part of our family, and we do not want you to leave. Jake stared at the elder, completely surprised. In all his years of military service and teaching, no one had ever made such an offer. We know this is a big decision, Vexnara added. We do not expect an answer immediately. But we want you to know that you will always have a home here if you choose to stay. That night, Jake lay awake listening to the storm outside and thinking about the elder's words. These people had become more than students to him. They were friends, family even. The thought of leaving them and returning to his quiet life on Earth felt wrong somehow, but he also had duties and responsibilities back home. The Galactic Council was expecting him to return and report on his mission. Other species might need his help too. As the wind howled outside his shelter, Jake realized he was facing the most difficult decision of his life. Jake stood at the edge of the settlement, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of purple and gold. 1 year had passed since he first arrived on Zelith Prime. What was supposed to be a 6-month teaching assignment had stretched into something much longer and more meaningful. The Zilithian settlement spread out before him like a small city. Well-built homes lined organized streets, gardens flourished between buildings, and workshops buzzed with activity. Smoke rose from chimneys and the sound of voices and laughter filled the air, but today was different. Today, Director Helen Carter was arriving to personally escort Jake back to Earth. Jake had received the message 3 days ago. The Galactic Council was concerned about his extended stay and wanted him to return immediately. They had other missions waiting, other species that needed human expertise. Behind him, Jake heard the soft footsteps of approaching Zilithians. He turned to see Nalthresh, Mixkala, Zexkalen, and Elder Vexnara walking toward him. Their blue skin looked darker than usual, which Jake had learned meant they were sad or worried. Commander Morrison, Nalthresh said quietly, the transport ship has been spotted approaching. Director Carter will be here within the hour, Jake nodded. He had been dreading this moment for weeks. How is everyone handling the news? The entire settlement wishes to speak with you before you make your final decision, Vexnara replied. They have gathered in the central area. Jake followed the group back into the settlement. As they walked, he marveled at everything the Zilithians had accomplished. They had not only survived their first harsh season, but they had thrived during it. The shelters now incorporated innovative heating systems that the Zilithians had invented themselves. They had developed new preservation techniques that kept food fresh longer than anything in Jake's training manuals. Their medical knowledge had advanced to the point where they could treat injuries and illnesses that would have killed them a year ago. Most importantly, they had created a functioning society. They had leaders, teachers, specialists, and systems for sharing resources and making decisions. They didn't just survive anymore. They had built a civilization. The central area was packed with nearly the entire population of 50,000 Zilithians. They sat in organized groups, families together, with the elders and group leaders in front. Every pair of large eyes was focused on Jake as he walked to the center of the gathering. "Friends," Jake began, his voice carrying across the silent crowd, "a year ago I came here to teach you basic survival skills. I thought I would show you how to find water, make fire, and build simple shelters. Then I would go home and you would continue your lives?" He paused, looking out at the sea of blue faces. "But that's not what happened. You taught me something I didn't expect to learn." Elder Vexnar stood up slowly. "Commander Morrison before. You speak further. Our people wish to say something to you." One by one, Zilithians began to stand and speak. A young mother talked about how Jake's lessons had helped her keep her children safe during the storms. An elderly craftsman described how human techniques had inspired new tools that made their work easier and more efficient. Nal Thresh stood and said, "You taught us that we could take care of ourselves. Before you came, we believed we were helpless. Without our machines, now we know that we are strong." Mixkala added, "You showed us how to work together as a community. Our people had never faced hardship before. We did not know how to support each other during difficult times. Now we do." Zexkalen spoke next. "You taught us to see opportunities where we once saw only problems. The storms that once terrified us now bring fresh water for our reservoirs. The wild animals we once feared now provide food and materials for our workshops." The testimonials continued for nearly an hour. Jake listened with growing emotion as person after person described how his teaching had changed their lives. But they also told him how much he had changed. "You arrived as a teacher," one elder said, "but you became our friend, our guide, our family member. You celebrated our successes and mourned our losses. You stayed with us through our darkest hours and shared our joy when we overcame our challenges." Finally, a young Zilithian child stood up. She couldn't have been more than the equivalent of 10 years old in human terms. "Commander Jake," she said in her small, chiming voice, "you taught us that being afraid is okay, but giving up is not. Will you give up on us now?" Jake felt tears forming in his eyes. These people had offered him something no one in his life ever had, a place where he truly belonged, where his skills and knowledge were not just useful but essential. At that moment, the sound of engines filled the air. Director Carter's transport ship was landing near the settlement. Jake could see the familiar white hull of a Galactic Council vessel touching down on the landing pad. "I need to go meet with Director Carter," Jake said to the assembled crowd. "When I return, I will give you my answer." Jake walked to the landing pad, his mind still swirling with everything he had heard. Director Carter emerged from the ship, looking exactly as she had a year ago, professional, serious, and slightly impatient. "Jake," she said as she approached, "you look good. This assignment seems to have agreed with you." "It's been an interesting year," Jake replied. Helen looked around the settlement with obvious surprise. "This is remarkable." "When I read your reports, I thought you might be exaggerating their progress. But seeing it in person, they've built a real civilization here." They walked through the settlement together, with Helen asking questions about everything she saw. Jake explained the innovations the Zilithians had developed, their social structure, their resource management systems, and their plans for the future. "They don't need you anymore, Jake," Helen said finally. "You've completed your mission beyond anyone's expectations. It's time to come home." Jake stopped walking and turned to face her. "What if I don't want to come home?" Helen studied his face carefully. "Jake, you have a life on Earth, a career, responsibilities, other people who need your expertise." "Do I?" Jake asked. "Helen, in 20 years of military service and teaching, I've never felt as useful or as valued as I have this past year." These people don't just need my skills, they appreciate them. They've made me part of their family. Helen was quiet for a long moment. You're talking about abandoning your entire species for aliens you've known for 1 year. I'm talking about choosing where I can do the most good, Jake replied. The Galactic Council has dozens of human survival experts. Earth has hundreds more, but the Zilithians have only me. They reached the edge of the settlement, where they could see the vast forests and mountains of Zilith Prime stretching to the horizon. There's something else, Helen, Jake said. I want to propose an exchange program. Bring human students here to learn from Zilithian innovations. Send young Zilithians to Earth to study human adaptability techniques. We could create something bigger than just survival training. Helen considered this idea. The council might be interested in that kind of program. It would foster better relations between species and share knowledge in both directions. But it would need someone to coordinate it, Jake continued. Someone who understands both human and Zilithian thinking. Someone who has lived with both cultures. Helen smiled for the first time since arriving. You've really thought this through, haven't you? I've had a year to think about it. They walked back toward the settlement, where the entire population was still gathered, waiting for Jake's decision. If I approve this exchange program, Helen said, you would technically still be working for the Galactic Council, just ... permanently. Stationed here, Jake felt a weight lift from his shoulders. That sounds perfect. Jake stood before the assembled Zilithians and raised his voice so everyone could hear. Friends, I have made my decision. With Director Carter's approval, I will be staying on Zelith Prime permanently. But not just as your neighbor, as your partner in building something new. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Thousands of Zilithians began making the chiming sounds that indicated extreme joy. Many stood and waved all four of their arms in celebration. Children ran in circles and adults embraced each other. Elder Vexnara approached Jake with tears glowing in his large eyes. Commander Morrison. No, Jake Morrison, you honor us beyond measure. We accept you not as our teacher, but as our brother. 6 months later, Jake stood in the same spot where he had first landed on Zelith Prime. But this time, he was welcoming a ship full of human students who had come to learn from the Zilithians. Next month, a group of young Zilithians would travel to Earth for the first time in their species' history. As he watched the students emerge from their transport ship, wide-eyed and eager, Jake smiled. He had come to Zelith Prime to teach basic survival skills. Instead, he had learned the most important lesson of all, that home isn't a place. It's where you can make the biggest difference in the lives of others. His radio crackled with a message from Earth requesting his monthly report. Jake picked up the transmitter and spoke words that had become famous throughout the galaxy. Jake Morrison reporting from Zelith Prime. Mission status. I came to teach them how to survive. Instead, they taught me how to truly live.